we debrief and unpack how are we supporting others in the community to make sure that the guys are well supported. Through that process, and it's not a requirement that people become mentors, people can just come along and benefit directly for themselves. But if people do want to take the next step, it's an option to formally be matched with another guy that's doing it tough, provided they've demonstrated all of the competencies that we're looking to see from them. But there'll be a lot of men as well that just are happy to use those skills to informally support their brother, their work colleague, their neighbour, whoever it might be. And we want to empower those guys in the recognition that a lot of guys won't reach out for support and say, hey, I'm doing it tough, can I have some access a counsellor, etc. But if we've got more men in the community that are reaching out saying, wow, you seem like you're doing it pretty tough, mate. You know, you're sitting there on your own and seem like you're struggling a bit. Why don't we go for a walk and have a chat? That we'll have more resilient communities if guys are equipped with those skills. We've so far delivered more than 150 resilience workshops across more than 400 men. And last year we asked the university, sorry, a bit of a typo there, the University of the Sunshine Coast to do an external evaluation, and we specifically narrowed down to the resilience workshops. Now, when we're talking about resilience workshops, some people might have certain imagery in their head. These are all images at different workshops that we introduce some concepts, and the ones down the bottom right are on the Sunshine Coast, and it's at the Markula Surf Club on the Sunshine Coast. And it's about introducing a few concepts, but then saying, hey guys, have a bit of a chat about that, see what you think, and then bring it back to the larger group. When COVID hit, as I mentioned, we moved to some online workshops, and then this is the top left is outside on the Gold Coast in the park across the road from the surf club at Mermaid Beach. And it's a great opportunity for the guys to connect and explore the concepts that we've introduced in the workshops. And for the guys that become qualified as mentors, we present them with the baggy white, which is a little bit like in the tradition of the baggy green. And that's John, the co-founder of Marcus Mission, presenting a baggy white to one of the men that's recently been connected up as a mentor to support another man. So some of the challenges that we were aware of that we would experience would be engaging men into the workshops. And we've been able to tackle that through a range of strategies. And one is making sure that the content is relevant. And we're able to tap into a lot of great work that John had done over 30 years of delivering different content to different audiences in his paid work capacity as a leadership coach in different settings, and making sure that that content stuck. I guess that if we just did a one-off workshop for men, there's no real stick factor, and making sure that we provided the opportunities for men to keep on building on the concepts and the skills through the resilience workshops. The locations have generally been at men-orientated settings such as surf clubs and community centres, neighbourhood centres, sports groups, etc. All of the communication is crucial to reach out in different ways, but making it connect and meaningful. And I've got a couple of flyers that I'll share in a moment. The concept of getting together over a sausage sizzle and having a feed up before or after the workshops, and the genuine connections of the volunteer area coordinators and the team members and the men themselves reaching out and making phone calls and connecting with the other guys, that it's more than just the time at the workshop, it's a real network of support of men supporting each other. The couple of flyers that we've developed over the past couple of years, and the one on the left is particularly targeting those service providers that are working with men that are doing it tough, that might say, hey, there's a program that I'm aware of that you might like to tap into, and really representing that a lot of guys have got challenges going on, but yeah, I'm fine, it's all right, don't worry about it. And deep underneath, no, that's not the case. And we've recently developed flyers that have got some images that really help people to understand that come along, you're going to see some sausages getting sizzled up and a chance to really connect that's in an informal mateship kind of way. So that's the program in a nutshell. Moving to the external evaluation that we did, which was asking the University of the Sunshine Coast to investigate the effectiveness of reducing the risk of suicide through the resilience building workshops. And we recruited men into the workshops in the Gold Coast, Bundaberg and Sunshine Coast at that time. And we also had men that were engaged in online workshops because COVID actually hit us right in the middle of the evaluation, and that had an impact on men's ability to engage in the face-to-face workshops for a period. There were a total of 70 pre and post surveys. There was 40 pre and 30 post surveys that were completed with both quantitative and qualitative data that was captured. We used the Connor-Davidson resilience scale, which has got really strong validity and reliability for those that are more research orientated, as well as having 9 open-ended questions that explored particularly around men's help seeking as well as help giving. And then a thematical analysis was done with all of the qualitative feedback, and some key themes were identified. And the research was done by Dr. Prudence Millier from University of the Sunshine Coast and Dr. Amanda Glacier, who was fantastic when we were first mapping out the evaluation, and Peter Braithwaite, who was doing his honours degree, his honours in psychology, and did this as part of his honours thesis. And ethics approval was obtained through the necessary committee. And what we found was that we didn't achieve statistical significance in the overall resilience scores, and the kind of key data are down the bottom there, that in relation to achieving the statistical significance, can we rule out that an improvement in overall resilience from the men was due to the actual program and not due to chance? And with the smaller numbers, it was always going to be a challenge to, relatively small numbers and time periods across seeing that change of resilience. But it was encouraging, in particular, 3 items on the scale around seeing some promising components of evidence that perhaps with larger sample size, etc., that we might be able to demonstrate that statistical significance. 5 themes were identified as well through the thematical analysis process, and that was that the men could help themselves and others. And that's been a real driver for a lot of the men to get engaged and overcoming the barrier of perceiving oneself as being someone that needs support, but being able to step into the program because of wanting to help others, and through that also experiencing personal growth along the way. Men became more aware of suicide and its prevention, and part of that is also the offerings of suicide prevention training throughout the workshops that was pretty hard to separate in the design of the evaluation. But men also felt that they were more resilient, which is a real key component to that hypothesis of us, that if men believe that they're going to be equipped to deal with whatever life throws at them, and once a curveball comes our way around a relationship breakdown or loss of finances or employment or status or whatever it might be, that if we feel that we're able to move past that and that we've got that resilience to move past, and that's a real key factor around reducing the risk. The sense of belonging that people experience, and Peter, who wrote up the thesis and the evaluation, drew upon Thomas Joyner's theory of interpersonal psychology of, that sense of belongingness, where Thomas Joyner talks about thwarted belongingness as a component towards suicidality. And so if men are more connected and feeling that sense of community, that's going to buffer against that potential, as well as men feeling greater confidence in themselves. Mindful of the time, and I'm kind of going to skim through a little bit of this and let people just have a quick skim of some of the other reports from the men, but it was really that combination of help giving and help seeking that really stood out for us in both the external evaluation and our own learnings. And anecdotal evidence when engaging with the men. And we've really drawn upon that in the model of Marcus' mission of not just connecting men formally or inviting guys in with a deficit approach, but hey, come and build the skills and confidence to help your mates. And through that process, a lot of men say, wow, I didn't really expect to benefit, or their vulnerabilities might come out once they start to engage. A few quotes that are both inside and outside of the external evaluation. I love this one. This was outside of the external evaluation from a man at the end of last year up at Bundaberg. I thought this was going to be shit, but it's bloody brilliant. And that's just, in the essence of a man talking about the program from the heart. I've never had men understand me so well. And I think part of that's a big part of those listening skills, and we introduce men to a LACE approach: listen, acknowledge, clarify, and explore. For a lot of men, it's listen and then give advice, or here's the solution, and it's a different approach. I'll let people have a skim of the next couple of what people have got out of it at different times. And the last one was in the external evaluation, that a man commented between Marcus' mission and a change to his diet, he was able to walk away from a planned suicide. And that really hit quite firmly to me when I read that at the evaluation. We have taken on a lot of the concepts in the Australian Men's Health Forum model of men's specific approach to suicide, and a number of those themes that I've talked about around the combination of giving help and getting help, making sure that it's men's specific environments, doing things in a way that allows men to get outside, throw a football around while talking about a concept, or use the bocce balls that we bring along to the workshops. And then it's also about empowering men to have the confidence and skills to reach out. And this is an image of one of our group coaching and support sessions where we debrief how we're supporting other men in the community. That doesn't have to be men we're formally linked with. It might be, hey, I'm worried about my brother or my neighbour, and I've done this, or I'm not sure what to do. And we unpack it, and we use the same approach that we encourage guys to use about asking questions that help the men get the clarity. So the next phase for us about the external evaluation is trying to have a look at what are the processes that are being used around the men reaching out, and how many men are each of these guys reaching out and connecting with, and what are the outcomes associated with that. So thanks for the opportunity to share briefly about Marcus' mission. We do have our Facebook page and Instagram, Marcus Mission WMQ, and really love for people to reach out and stay connected with us after this week's events.
Fantastic, thank you, Glenn. Some absolutely fascinating research and some great results, and some amazing work that obviously you and the group at Marcus Mission and Wesley are doing. We're going to switch the order around again. So Peter, we might actually get you to present. Our producers are currently working on giving David access, so that should be ready to go in the next few minutes. The joys of running remote. So I'm going to hand over to Peter Seligman.
Hi, thank you very much. Pardon me. If I could summarise what, having just listened to the Marcus Mission content, very similar in some of both the causal and establishment factors. We have, Banksia has grown out of a personal lived experience founder who did not actually take suicide steps, but was on that journey, reached out, and then saw that there was a gap in the market around helping people who would not necessarily have a diagnosis in that space of mental health. So 3 or 4 years down the track, 4 and a half years down the track, as an organisation, we're maturing, establishing more processes and practical steps around what we do and how we do it. Like Marcus Mission, how effective is our work? Anecdotally, very similar results. It's marvellous. We connect. I feel better. I feel supported, and so on. We're at the stage where we had a program initially designed by the UTS, University of Technology Sydney, and we're about to commence a program review step. anecdotally, we know it works. As a clinician, I know it needs some extra stuff in it to address, I call it clinical suspension, so that we can adapt the program, that our facilitators have more capacity to adapt what they do and how they do it for the group. Again, that's feedback from our participants. We need more information about that. We need to change it. So I am taking an approach where if you take an adult learning model and men have a particular style around how they learn and adapt and change their behaviour, they've got to hear it, see it, practice it, think about it, consult about it, and then adapt it and then use it. So we're now training the facilitators to take an approach with themselves. So I'll pick a name out of the top of the list here. So Anthony, you're about to take up a new sport and you've never played that sport before. You don't even know the first thing about how to hold the racket. We'll say you're going to take up hockey for the sake of the argument, mature age hockey student. Okay. So you're at that stage of unknowing incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. But you meet somebody who introduces you to the sport. You go, gee, that could be fun. And then you have your first lessons and you become consciously incompetent. You go, gee, that's hard. I need to think about it. You get some coaching, you get some support, you get some mediation and all that sort of stuff. And after a year or two, you know the rules and you know what you're doing and you become consciously competent. Now, like most of us, we don't actually think about how we drive to our office or to our home or to our partners or families. So we've become unconsciously competent. So men's mental health is a continuum. And a lot of the programs that organisations like ours and others around the country do is to create a sense of awareness in an individual's head that the skills and skill sets that they've grown up with, acquired through their friends, relatives, social values, that whole onion skin around the individual and their personalities may not be the ones that are going to see them through the tough times. So that's, again, it's a set of skills that give you the skills to cope with, deal with, self-soothe and self-right as the going gets tough. So that's usually a bit of an eye-opener for the men who participate in programs. I ran for the last few years prior to coming here. I was heavily involved in young adult education space. And I suppose the anecdote where I designed a resilience program that went for 15 or so weeks with a group of young apprentices, and they still talk about it. They all came out of it using something different, but they had a common language to talk to each other. So somebody realised that they actually relax okay. They can self-regulate and stay calm, but they worried about other things. So the bit they took up was the skills around managing their thought processes. So our program is designed to support men in a journey to acquire a different set of skills or deepen some of the competencies and skills that they've got. And in many cases, also alter some of the skills that they automatically use. So they're acquiring new skills. Okay. So in terms of then reviewing it, so what we find is some groups, depending on their age or their interest, will emphasize some of the things that are age appropriate. But if I'm going to teach mindfulness, just as part of an underpinning program logic of using CBT techniques, I'm not going to use chocolate with a 4-year-old, but I might use chocolate with an adult. Okay. So how we monitor and how we measure pardon me, what we do is reflecting in the groups that we then use. So in terms of making our services work, we're developing a suite of curriculum. And again, I'll use the educational thing, so that the facilitators have got the skills to both deliver well, develop a therapeutic alliance with the guys in their rooms, and be able to then respond and manage those groups well. They're not there to provide mental health support, but we've also built, like Marcus' mission, a very tight safety and wellbeing referral network internally, so that if there's somebody not travelling well, the individuals are then supported. The other thing we do and spend a lot of time doing is making sure that guys are group ready. Because of the nature, if we've got somebody who's experiencing a psychotic or a significant mental health issue at the moment, we will not actually take them into a group. We will either refer them out, talk to them how they're being supported, make sure we stay in contact so that when they're group ready, then they're in that space. We're finding success in the space where a lot of government money is directed into crisis support or crisis services. And I've used the men's behaviour change programs, drug and alcohol detox programs. And we're getting traction in supporting guys who are exiting those programs and giving them a step down, soft landing of support to aid their return back into the new normal for them. So that the risk, and this is where the suicidality comes into it, that the risk of them getting back into the same dark space they were is managed. Okay, those of you who know any of the theories around risk, suicidality is a whole lot of cheese, the Swiss cheese model, all the holes line up and the cheese collapses. So, and often the holes are not visible to all of the people visible in an individual's life. I might see Glen from this angle, his mother sees him from another, his partner sees him from another, and so on. So we also then trained, again, all our facilitators going through mental health first aid and so on. So again, the due diligence we put into our facilitators is very important, because we know the better they are, the better the outcomes, the greater the level of engagement of the participants. The other thing we know from men like to be part of a club. Again, it's all around that attachment theory stuff. Men like to belong, and if their attachments are destroyed or damaged because of relationship breakdown, social isolation, mental health issues or whatever, a support group meets into quite a fundamental need. It's not always well articulated by men, but we know that men like to feel belong. That's why they join rugby clubs, football clubs, golf clubs, social groups, whatever it is, to provide the structure for their sense of belonging. People who are experiencing mental health or some situational psychological distress as a reaction to a life event, again, need that support. They often have not had to need it before, so they don't know what they need at that point. So aiming the work to identify men so they go, hey, that's me, I need to do something about that. The call to action is a bit of a shift that we're implementing at the moment to increase the numbers of people coming in. We survey, we did until recently, the guys at the room would always surveyed every second or third meeting, and our meetings in January every 3 to 4 weeks. It's an interesting concept, in terms of measuring their well-being. We over-surveyed them, so that's a learning. Don't over-survey them. It's a bit like measuring your weight every day. You won't get the weight loss story. You'll just get distressed. So we've now reviewed that and are mapping their well-being over a longitudinal period. So after 4 weeks, are you feeling better on the following scale? So we've built in the resilience scales, and are you coping better? So it's about performance. Are they coping better, thinking better, reacting better, self-regulating better, or whatever the key issue is within that tool? And we're now accumulating that data. When I've got a bit more to that data, that'll be a basis to then go back to UTS or someone else like that to conduct a review of the program longitudinally, having gone out for 4 years. So, like most of the programs, offered, like Marcus, myself, ourselves, and others, the underpinnings are pretty sound. They're pretty general knowledge. They're good psychosocial education. I think the interesting thing about men in Australia is culturally we don't seek help easily. And I think the underlying and underpinning distress that men experience when they can't cope with something or it doesn't go right is the shame and guilt. And I think as an opportunity to improve men's health, we need to address the issues about shame and guilt much more proactively in the men's mental health space, because it often drives a whole lot of aberrant behaviour, particularly when, what they feel they want to do, what they can do, what they are doing are at odds with some of their values. So we're now starting to work with men about in a group and saying, all right, well, what are the values? Where are you finding a conflict? So, I've done a lot of work over the years with the LGBTIQ space, and one of the primary features of mental health distress in that space is guilt and shame, particularly in men who may be coming out in that journey there where they face social condemnation. So in terms of men's health, I think that the elephant in the room about often aberrant mental health or people not coping is dealing with guilt and shame, and also about the shoulds, the tyranny of the shoulds. As a friend of mine once said, you should be a better father, you should be a better brother, you should be a better partner, you should be fitter, taller, darker, slimmer, fitter, whatever. And again, we've got getting men to deal with the fact that they're never going to be 6'2" when they're 5'9". Again, in terms of dealing with the reality of who they are and self-acceptance. So a lot of the work that I think the openings up for our space and the other organisations like ours is about improving men's acceptance of who they are and where they are at that moment in time, and learning just to sit and not seek a quick solution to a problem if you're 35 that's been 35 years in the making. Okay, so we get guys coming in. So we've done a lot of work over the last few months about improving how we relate to the guys when they first connect, so that we know a little bit more about them, the intake process, so that we understand what they're expecting from us and what they can expect from us as well. So it's a really, it's a really important journey, so that think of those of you who've had a significant health issue. My oncologist said this is not going to be a quick fix. This will take a year or two. So it's about managing expectations in terms of making sure that the guys who come in know that it's a journey. They're going to practice it. They'll get better at it. So they'll move through that learning stages of going into, practicing it, learning it, being conscious about it, reminding themselves of it, not beating themselves up when they relapse or fall off the perch or lose their shit, whatever. And it's okay to do that, because after all, we're human. Okay, so anecdotally, one of the guys said the other week to me, when I did a bit of a group review, they said, I really lost my shit in the car the other day, with somebody, and I realised that I did have the tool to actually calm down more quickly, and I used it and I felt better for it. And then he said 2 weeks later, he was driving along and somebody cutting off on the traffic, and he had that split second where he consciously engaged in different behaviour, and he got a different outcome. So that was for him the big light bulb moment. So as a clinician, my goal is to create those light bulb moments for as many men in as many situations as often as possible. And that's how we prevent suicide, so that we don't get guys going down the rabbit hole of loneliness and isolation, where they make an intensely private, personal, and ultimately selfish decision to self-harm. And for every person who gets a light bulb moment and has another tool in their toolkit to deal with the world, and they know themselves better than me as an aging psychologist, working in the men's mental health space, well, I'll have done my job better. So that's about how we know what we're doing right. We're at the process of, again, evaluating the program. We've been going for long enough now to actually have a look at the program logic and unbundle it. And I'm going out to some philanthropy. I've got discussions within the donor sector to see if we can get some funding, because to go back over the last 3 or 4 years of participants. So that's a bit of the stuff. That's us. Again, the anecdotal results are very similar to the Marcus mission ones in terms of what guys say once they connect, and they do feel better. And no statistic will ever replicate. What I'm interested in doing is following them up to seeing, are they behaving differently? Are they getting different outcomes in their everyday lives? Are they behaving differently when challenged at work? Are they behaving differently when they're angry or frustrated? Are they behaving differently in terms of their relationships with others? So ultimately, that's my aim in terms of the evidence base. And that's, to me, is how I make a case for the funders, because often for those of us who are in that sort of charity, not-for-profit space with a mission, particularly if there is still, if you're a founder person, you've got the mission. They've got to see a connection in terms of the policy frameworks that they're operating on. And unfortunately, both at state and federal level, they operate on a very much, your arm is broken, I'll fix the arm. But they rarely, if ever, inquire as to why you fell over in the first place. And why did you break your arm? Okay. So my aim is to have an evidence base that gives an argument that says, I want the ambulance at the top of the cliff to stop you falling over it. as opposed to at the bottom of the cliff and just to repair the damage, which unfortunately I suspect our budget, which came down last night, has lots and lots and lots of big amounts of money, is all at the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff service, and is not nearly emphasising enough the services like all of ours here, which is struggling to deal with the men before they even know they've got a problem. So there's my political statement for the day, and you know, and that'll do my bit for the good of the universe.
Fantastic, thank you, Peter. That was phenomenal, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. If we can build a society of men who are comfortable, who become more comfortable with identity, have that ability and confidence to be able to reach out and ask for assistance without fear of stigma or perception, then we automatically become a very early preventive and proactive society.
I may just make one more observation about that, in that often we're our own worst enemy. Okay, we beat ourselves up endlessly about, you know, I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not, you know, I'm not spending enough time with the kids. I'm not making enough money. I'm not, whatever it is, whatever that, I'm going to beat myself up. It is about groups like ours and yours and everybody else's. It's about increasing levels of self-acceptance. Okay, you will trip up, you will drink too much, you will have a McDonald's on a Saturday night. That's okay. It's when you do it every night and every day that you've got to have a problem. Okay, so it's working with the worried well. All of our cohorts are about working with the worried well, and often they don't know why they're worried and they find it difficult to deal with it. So men's support groups say it's okay, it's a safe place to go, this isn't working for me, what can I do about it? And that's where the peer-to-peer support comes in. To most people, when they ring a helpline, be it a, you know, whatever, any number of the services that are out there, do their own problem solving. They just need a voice to listen and bounce an idea around. So our men's groups might deal with slightly more complex situations, but they also need, you know, sometimes it's okay just to talk about it, go away, think about it, try it, do some research, process it, and then keep going. So again, you know, it's that shift into a conscious, competent stage. And I'll give you a very personal one. Having had 4 bouts of cancer, which are incidental, I cannot stomach champagne or greasy or oily foods, for a variety of reasons. But every now and then I go back and I think I'll just give it a go. Okay, and I have the usual and expected reaction, which is not pretty, and might take me to my bed and my bathroom for a few hours in a day. Okay, but I'm learning to be consciously competent about what works for my guts. Okay, and as a clinician, that reminds me every time I eat the wrong thing, it reminds me that you're human and it's okay to make a mistake, but don't do it again. But occasionally I do.
Well said. I think one of the advantages we have in this space, you know, if we sort of look at clinical versus non-clinical, you know, there's a broad number of community-based organisations, you know, like yours, the work that Men's Table are doing, you know, Mr. Perfect, Man Walk, and so that are really sort of getting back to that core social connection with men and providing those opportunities and outlets for men just to socially engage and connect. And, you know, we know that the benefits that has on a proactive mental health approach are huge. The beauty within this space is that we're all happy to collaborate with each other and knowledge share, and you know, quite happily admit, no, look, that's not our space, but hey, have a chat to these guys over here because this is what they do really well. And the more of that can happen, the better it's going to be for society as a whole. Okay, tech issues sorted, finally. We will now hand over to David and Ben from Men's Table.
G'day, we're on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep,
Yes,
loud
all
and
right.
clear.
Oh, good.
Picture's crystal.
Thank you for that. I had a really panic mode there for about 15 minutes, and I thought I was going to have to run the tech, and that would have been terrible. So thank goodness we got that sorted out. I'm Ben Hughes from the Men's Table.
And I'm David.
David is frozen. No. And yeah, jointly we sit in the kitchen at the men's table, so we don't have a head office. We like to serve the tables as such, so we were very much in a serving role in those tables. And we'll flick on just a little bit, tell you a little bit about the men's table and the founding process of what actually happened. So at the beginning of 2011, life was pretty rough for me. I've been through a very destructive divorce, and I left with keeping my CDs and my Wharfdale speakers, and things weren't going well for me. I was pretty depressed, self-employed. Self-employment was going rapidly over here. And I had no one to talk to, really. It was very lonely existence, moving out as, you know, with my boy every other weekend and every Wednesday night, and it wasn't good. So at a business networking meeting, after a meeting, I was just talking to two guys, and I told them the story, and they said that apparently the conversation got a little bit darker. I can't remember, but certainly that has happened in my life at some stages. They turned around to me and they said, "Mate, we know exactly how you feel." And I thought, I hear a lot of that because I'm pretty open. So I normally have two speeds. I have overly excited or depressed. That's basically my two speeds that I normally operate in. But they said, "We know exactly how you feel." And they told me their story. And I thought in that moment, what's just happened here? And after giving it a bit of thought, I thought, I've just opened the door for them to be vulnerable too. And they've told me their story, and they've just dropped right in. So the next week at that business meeting, I stood up and said, I'm going to start a men's group. Who's in? And we've been meeting on the third Wednesday of every month now. Next month will be 10 years. So, and we sit and we talk about the highs and lows of our lives. So that's what we do at the men's table. And then at the beginning of 2019, David gave me a call and said, "What are we doing about men's work?" Do you want to?
I'll pick it up from there then, Ben. Yeah, so we wanted to take it out and share with other guys and see if there was interest. And the first step was to go back to our men and ask them, what have we been doing that's made this work? Because we had been consciously approaching how we do it and the process. We'd had a few conflict points in those years. And we teased out 2 pages of dot points, each of which was lived experience of the group. And all of these things that are in our fundamentals, we call them now, which is the basis of our tables, would be no surprise to any of you guys. There's a lot of commonality here. The idea of using I statements, you know, talking from the personal experience and talking from the heart, because really it's a place for sharing feelings and talking about what's really going on. And we already heard earlier about that tendency to fix. I love that LACE acronym that I think you talked about. I can't remember your name now. Sorry, I forgot, from Marcus Mission. But the LACE acronym, that's right. Encouraging guys to do more listening and so on, rather than just jumping into fix. And talking about feelings and not beliefs, because if people share beliefs about the world, their views of the world, then others can disagree, and that can fracture the table. Whereas when people share feelings, there's no disagreement. That's exactly what their experience is. And we also recognised and teased out that the commitment that each man had to the others was a core part of what made the table work. And that's something we really impress upon men when they arrive to a new table now, is that they're here to serve themselves, but they're also here to serve the other men simply by showing up and by giving them the listening ear. And that allows for the table to build over time, and the trust and the safety can be established over time. Over to you, Ben.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of digress slightly from our presentation and talk about what's happening for me right now. Last night we were in Bundanoon and we started a table down there. And the first guy who kind of led off with a share went quite deep, which set the scene. It opened the door for everybody else to have that share. And it was a vulnerability that allowed everybody else to feel comfortable. And we've talked a little bit about the shame and the guilt. And by that first man dropping in very deep, it really got rid of a lot of that shame and guilt that you were talking about, Peter, and it would just allowed them to flow. And my word, I've never heard anything like it. It was extraordinary, and the unburdening of what went on for these men was just, yeah. I'm still quite raw from last night, actually. When I sit and watch television and I see some men doing hideous things, and there is a percentage of men doing hideous things, you know, a little bit of my manhood dies every single time when I see that. And you know, there is a real conversation going on at the moment, and we thought, how can we enter this conversation? So we came up with healthy men, healthy masculinities, and healthy communities. Being proud to be a man, you know, really showing the great qualities of what men have. So we lead with those kind of 3 H's a lot of the time, and we don't use the T word around masculinity whatsoever. So it's very much about positive framing about what goes on for a man. Yeah.
We, like others have talked about, the anecdotal evidence is always strong. And as Ben's just shared, the stories are powerful. And we will never depart from sharing stories as a part of the framing and the introduction, and including to funders and other agencies, governments, and so on. Is the stories really have weight. And we heard plenty when we first started. You know, men came to the entrees where we introduced new men to how it works. One of them right in the middle there said to us, "I've got mates, but you know, we just talk about footy and shit." And he was referring to that superficiality that is so often the case in friendship groups. And I can relate to it. I've got a group of mates I've been playing golf with for 25 years, and it never drops down into what's really going on. We heard another guy in the top left there. I sit on the couch and listen to my wife on the phone arranging her social life while I watch telly. And we've heard many stories of men who realise they haven't been investing in relationships, or they haven't been investing in more meaningful friendships, the ones that are more intimate, where they can have that sharing. Men in transition on the bottom left there, going through divorce and suddenly realising that they're isolated and disconnected. So these were the sorts of things we'd been hearing, and we're pretty confident that there was a need as we started to launch other tables. And then this next video, this is another example of what we've heard from a few people when we had a launch event back in February last year, an official launch event. So I'll just play this for a couple of minutes because this is more of the anecdotal evidence.
I think the men's table fulfills a need for men to be able to communicate properly and deeply with other men in a way that women have learnt to do over the generations. I think it helps understand ourselves, it helps us understand others, it helps us understand life.
I think he quite likes to be able to connect with people. Like, he's a very open sort of person. But I think probably like a lot of men, he struggles to talk about personal things. I mean, even, you know, he'll talk to me about stuff, but I think it's easier for him to sit around with a group of other men and they can all share things that they might not necessarily talk to their partners about.
I think the first one is support and be supported, and that's kind of really important, but the being supported part's really good. The other thing is being listened to without judgment or being dismissed. And the third one is probably being part of something that feels good. I can't put it in the words. It kind of just feels good and you know you're part of it.
My husband goes to a men's table. I think it's been really beneficial because he is a man in his mid-60s and traditionally they don't have a lot of close connections and they rely on their wife for it. So he's enabled to get new friends and new interests. It helps our relationship because it takes the pressure off me having to be the emotional everything. And it broadens what Michael does and what his interests are.
Just to be able to speak honestly and open with a group of people and have the opportunity to be heard.
Extraordinarily helpful because in my experience as a partner you want to fix the problems and so you want to fix the man, and sometimes it's unhelpful to try and do that. So I think that opportunity to go and have a conversation in a safe space where people aren't actually trying to fix you, they're just listening, is really helpful, certainly for us.
It's actually really simple. I mean, I've enjoyed sitting in circle with men before, but really I've moved into an area, and the thing that I feel most comfortable doing is connecting with guys and in this sort of way where we can just be open and I think and really speak our heart, and then just having that as a container where we all feel safe. We've got ages from 35 to 80. It's fantastic, and I love it.
So we had the anecdotal evidence, but what we didn't have was, and then we had some timely advice arrive to us.
We've, well, I'll extend that a little bit. We've now got men from 23 to 86, so our reach is quite broad. What we do is deceptively simple. It's really about listening and talking and sharing. That's really what we do. But if we went to people and we said, yeah, we get guys and they meet in a safe room and they have a meal together and they might have a couple of beers and they talk about their shit, that doesn't really mean anything. So we had to go away and think about how can we actually articulate that a lot better, because nobody's going to fund you if you're just saying kind of what you do. You need the evidence, right, to actually get that. And we were fortuitous that something happened to us that we were unable to be able to produce a model of care. So we went back to our tables and we go back and we're right in the middle of our annual survey, and we do an annual survey of men to find out what's really going on for them. And from that, we find the stories. And when we're explaining the men's table, stories are so powerful, and David went through them. And last night, again, huge amounts of just stories, and these men walk amongst us, right? That you've just got to scratch the surface and it can just come out. So we have the stories and we do the survey, which is the evidence, which led us on to produce our model of care document. It's a great document, and it's enabled us to secure funding because we can actually go to people and say, hey, this is what we do, but this is the research and these are the results.
So the timely advice also came from both the Mental Health Commission and then a consultant that we have fortunately forged a relationship with. And initially, we just thought we just want to build more tables, but we now see the value in the evidence and the model of care. So now we'll just step you through how we went about that. So the first stage was really to start digging into the literature. And we had a loose hypothesis as we started that there was a benefit of the particular attributes of how the tables were set up on men's well-being and mental health, and on some other things as well. But as we dug into the literature, there was emerging themes, and we also saw where there were some gaps in research evidence, particularly around peer support groups. There is some, but not a huge amount, and particularly not how they function and why they function, why the benefits flow from peer support groups. So that led us to the formulation of an initial sketch outline of our logic model before we began our survey work and research work. So we had a loose hypothesis that shored up as time went on. We'd identified loosely the kind of problem areas we were shaping up, and then the literature really informed those. And then we asked men in the survey about the inputs, essentially the elements of the table that we thought were working well or contributed to the outcomes. And then we asked them about the outcomes as well. So we progressively worked through and kind of established the model over the course of some months. And we had 75-minute tables, conducted a paper and pen survey. We kept it really practical, really simple. We ran a women's focus group, and you saw in the video too, we knew from very early on that women were great supporters and also had their views about what was working for their men. And so the evidence came through loud and clear. And firstly, in terms of the inputs, we saw what were the things that the men were really valuing. And so the idea of ongoing commitment, literally showing up for each other once a month, 79% of men said, yeah, this is a key thing that makes this work. The in-person contact. I know there's another Zoom group going on right now about online support. And we did online in COVID, but we found it was kind of like a B- as a grade versus an A+ experience, which is the in-person. And then some other things, sharing a meal, simple thing, but it normalizes. We got demographic evidence as well. We saw the bar graph of our age categories. And this is the kind of current capture. And that might reflect a little bit of our own networks as we started and some of our own marketing, but we're hoping to reach into particularly the younger field, and we've actually now got men in the decade below that 36 category. We've got a few men in their late 20s coming. And finally, we were really heartened by the outcomes. 90%, what was it? What percentage, Ben? Said it's a safe place to share. I've got 95. A mental block there. 95%, that's right, said it's a safe place to share. 80% said it's a place to share feelings and vulnerability, and there's a mental health well-being. So that was 80%. I think the share feelings was about 85%. And that there's a social connection benefit, and that the communication skills that they get from the table flow on to other relationships. So they were some of the sort of highlights that really jumped out for us. And that then led us to our model, which is articulated in the model of care document. These problem areas are being touched on through the other speakers, and we are all familiar with them. Men's mental health and suicide risk, obviously we know the numbers. The social isolation, the loneliness, and the lack of meaningful male friendships was a really key thing that jumped out for us in the research. And then tied to that is these traditional restrictive masculine norms, these ideas about being a man where you can't show weakness. And that leads to the sort of help-seeking reticence as well. And on the impact side, we were able to see, wow, there's a real preventative mental health benefit here. It's about resilient communities. We can see that from the community belonging piece that the men get, and also the idea that they're exploring new versions of masculinity and healthy masculinities came out as well. I'll hand over to you again, Ben.
So we came up with our model of care document, which we ran through a graphic designer to make it more palatable for people, and they came up with this beautiful man on the front. He's just got this beautiful open face, and it's an evidence-based report. It's downloadable from our website, so you can actually go to our website and download it. And we encourage you to do that. It's full of stories. So there's various stories from men which you'll find very impactful, and you would have heard similar stories from men in your life. If you give them the safe emotional space to share, those stories are right out there. At the time of putting this together, Malcolm Turnbull had just released his book, in which he alluded to some of the issues that he'd had. So I thought, I'll just pop him an email and see how we go. And he came right back and said, yes, we'd love to support. And these are his own words. And we're very honored to have that. And again, what he's done there, he has shown vulnerability, which is quite unusual for somebody in his position. Canberra, I would imagine, would be an extremely lonely place with very few people you could trust to be vulnerable. So we're privileged to have him up on the front there.
As Ben's already alluded to, the model of care since being launched in June 2020 has really been a fantastic sort of key foundation stone. It's led to new partnerships. So when we're talking to other agencies, they see that we've got some data and we've got a logic model behind us now. And it's also led to funding. It's helped us to secure funding. Importantly, there are men out there, when they step into something, they want to know the details. They want to know the background. Is this credible? And we get men downloading the model of care and reading it. Some come to our entrees and say, I've read the book. Probably one of the more important things that we didn't realize and appreciate at the time when we were first issued the challenge, if you like, or given that timely advice, was how much clearer we are on what the model is and where we contribute. One of the things we did in the document, you'll see, is we looked at other models and tried to extrapolate, and we had to make some assumptions, but extrapolate where on different continuums do each of these agencies fit? What are some of the different models out there, and where do we fit specifically? And that's also helped us to recognise the value of other programs and also where we fit. It's also given us a real commitment to maintaining the fidelity of our model. And that's really building in our processes, ensuring that we reevaluate, as Ben said, and that ongoing evaluation is now kind of in our DNA, that we want to keep ensuring that we know what the impact is rather than just trusting the anecdotal stories.
And of course, every good presentation finishes with a call to action. So we run entree nights. So we use some gourmet terms. You know, David is head chef. I'm front of house. We very much play to our skills in that. We sit in the kitchen, and our entree events are where men come and find out a little bit more about the men's table, where we get them to share and open up. And last night, I'm going to go on about it. It was extraordinary what I heard at the table. We share the fundamentals with them, and we run through it because we like to make sure that it is set up solidly. So these tables are set up solidly, and we give them a bit of information. So tonight, in fact, at West Ryde, and all these dates can be found on our website. West Ryde, then we have a Zoom next Monday, Manly on the 8th of June, and Melbourne on the 15th of July. So all that information can be found on our website. And look, it might not be for you, but you might know a man who could do with a helping hand. And the Zoom one enables us to get men from wherever and just start that conversation.
So we just wanted to lay out the story of the model of care, and particularly, I think the key underlining point is that, you know, stories have an impact. There's no doubt about it, and they will always have an impact. But it's stories plus the evidence plus a model of care that can really help to secure greater levels of consistent funding, and just give more surety about what it is that we're actually doing that's working. So we encourage, you know, every other men's group to follow on a similar kind of path and journey of getting that evidence behind you and clarifying your own model. Thanks very much.
We've gone
Sorry,
a bit. I'll just very quickly finish with, you can see my t-shirt there. We just don't talk about footy and shit.
Love it.
We normalise it.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Firstly for your patience while we got the tech organised, but also for the phenomenal work from something that just started as such a simple concept. I know for a fact you're having a huge impact across the country, as are all our speakers. We do have a couple of minutes for some questions. If anybody wants to sort of raise their hand or drop something in the chat box. And while I'm just waiting for that to feed through, I will give a shameless plug to what's coming up this afternoon for Men's Health Connected. Over lunch at 12:30, we've got a forum on content creators and community builders. We've got Sean Coffin from The Modern Bloke, Callum from Young Blood, and Omar from Four Men on that. At 1:30, we're dual streaming again. Stream 1 is Stronger Together, Making Partnerships and Collaboration Work. And stream 2 is Funding and Fundraising. Is there money for men's health? The never-ending question that we all ask for and about. And then to finish off, we look deep into the future. We look ahead to 2030 and for the topic of where is men's health heading. And we've got some great speakers on that one. That session is going to be chaired by Glen, the CEO of Australian Men's Health Forum. We've got Jeremy Forbes from Holt, Nick Sutherland from the Mind Fit Woke Bloke podcast, John Millam from Mentoring Men, and Tom Harkin, who is the co-founder and CEO of Tomorrow Man. So a great way to finish the afternoon. No questions have come through. So thank you again to all our speakers for this afternoon. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. Thank you for everyone for joining us. And we'll end this session now, and we'll reconvene this afternoon.